And welcome back to part 2 of the Real Super Geeks. This will be the Trek portion, although we'll cover a couple other things as well. But this will be the Trek portion of this week's broadcast. And I came across an interesting little news story that talked about whom we almost saw as Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek The Next Generation, and that is the African-American actor Yaphet Kotto. Which I had no idea about, but apparently they've unearthed a casting memo from pre-production of The Next Generation, and they have a lot of alternate actors that they were interested in or had come in to audition for these roles. And as it turns out, Yaphet Kotto, who he went on to play an important role in Homicide: Life on the Streets in the 90s on NBC. He's been in a ton of films, Live and Let Die, one of the James Bond movies. He was in Alien. You probably saw him in Alien. Anyway, so it turns out in the interview that he gave about this, he turned down the role because he had been doing a lot of movies at that point, and back then it was not quite so fashionable for movie actors to slum it in series television. So he said no, and we got Patrick Stewart, of course. So that was kind of interesting. But I don't know if you all got a chance to take a look at this casting memo to see who some of the other might have been. So let me share that with you and see what you think. Okay, this is dated April 13th, 1987. So it was exactly this week. I can't do the math. Back in 1987. So here's a list of the actors who were being considered for the roles in Star Trek The Next Generation. So
Wesley Snipes as Geordi.
Yep.
Oh my God! No, that's hilarious.
Here's an even better one. Although this one was known, Denise Crosby actually had the inside track on playing Troy.
Thank God that didn't happen.
Hey, at least she would have lived, right?
There you go.
And here's another one for Tasha. One of the actors they were looking at is Rosalind Chow, who went on to play, one of the botanists on DS9 and TNG, who married Keiko O'Brien. Exactly. I didn't recognize the other Tasha actors, but Rosalind Chow stood out. She's a fantastic actor.
Geordi LaForge, Reggie Jackson, as in the MLB Hall of.
No, Reggie Jackson is in the guy who's on Star.
Look, they also wanted Tim Russ.
Reggie Jackson, Tim Russ, Wesley Snipes.
Yeah.
Back was Mr. October. So
true story about Wesley Snipes. I met him when I worked at Universal Studios. He rode my Jaws boat.
Nice.
Really?
Yeah.
Beverly Cheryl McFadden?
Yeah.
Is that supposed to be Gates?
Yeah.
I think
Cheryl
so.
is her real name. Gates is her stage name, I think.
Okay. So Mitch Ryan, Roy Thins, and Yaphet Kotto, Patrick Bachow?
Yeah, I didn't recognize many of the others.
Michael O'Gorsman for Riker, Greg Marks, Jonathan Frakes, and Ben Murphy.
See, I've seen this list before. And I just question, like was Yaphet really given the role and he declined it, or was it something where like he did maybe a couple of readings for it and was like, yeah, I don't want to do this, as they were.
I think it was probably more likely that.
Yeah.
But
I have no idea who
he
this
probably
is.
did good readings. I mean, they were seriously
sure.
considering him.
Plant-based life.
these
Oh
are
my goodness.
definitely 80s actors.
Yeah.
I like the idea of J.D. Roth as Wesley Crusher.
Yeah, J.D. Roth. I have a bunch of pictures of him up on the share screen right now, and I didn't recognize the name until I saw the pictures. I'm like, oh wow. I wonder if I wonder if people would have hated him as much as they did Will Wheaton.
Well, it wasn't Will Wheaton's fault.
A lot of people blame him though.
It wasn't his fault. It was the writing. He did the best he could, like any other actor.
He was suffered under bad writing for TNT.
Honestly, with this space, I am willing to bet that I'd probably hate J.D. Roth much.
Well, J.D. Roth's career has gone away from acting towards game show hosting. So yeah, I mean, I can see why you would say that. But I also like the was it Eric Maniak as Data? That would be pretty interesting. He played.
Oh right, Eric Maniak.
Played
He
the
played.
Traveler.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think they went with the right person.
Also, is interesting is Kevin Peter Hall for the role of Data. He was the suit actor for The Predator, as well as Harry from Harry and the Hendersons.
You know what's very interesting is you don't see Michael Dorn. You don't even see. Do they even have Worf's character up there?
So he was the Saru's actor. It was that actor of the day.
Interestingly, the memo makes a point of noting that Rosalind Chow was the favorite for Tasha Yar.
They were still going to kill her off.
Reggie Jackson for Geordi, Mark Lindsay Chapman for Data.
It would have been a very, very different looking show, that's for sure.
And notice there's no Klingon at all. No Klingon.
One of the stories.
Worf was there.
Worf was very much a secondary character.
Yeah, he was a supporting role, not really part of the main cast.
One of the things that is missing here, so under Riker, like one of the apocryphal stories I always heard is that Billy Campbell was really being considered for Riker. And he lost out to Jonathan Frakes, and that's why he comes back as the outrageous O'Connor later on.
Is one of the worst. I hate that episode.
I hated that episode too. And notice who else is not on this. Marina Sirtis is not on here at all.
I think when they found Marina Sirtis, they were like, "She's our Troy," and then they moved Denise Crosby over into. Tasha.
By the way, you can't be English because we've already got an English person on the cast. But isn't he supposed to be French?
Well.
Whatever. 90s TV.
Gotta love it.
Yeah.
That's a distinction that's lost on so many Americans. So.
Harn.
Oh, there you are, Shawn. You're here
late. You are late.
We were just talking about the alternate universe cast for Next Generation. If the casting memo had proved correct from April 13th, 1987, which is up on the screen right now. So anyway, interesting.
I know. So where are we at with that? Well,
we're pretty much wrapping up on that one. So,
okay. Well,
okay. So now let's go to, I've been looking forward to this for over a week because Ross messaged me about this, and that is a YouTube video that went deep into the origins of the Borg, and which appears to be a big topic, a popular topic amongst the Star Trek fandom.
Well, it was a big topic for us when Discovery was playing.
Indeed. You mean Picard, but yes.
Sorry, Picard. Thank you.
Yes. And you all know that, of course, my theory was that it had to do with the Romulans, that it was a Romulan experiment run awry, which turned into a popular alternative theory. The show actually completely sidestepped the origin of the Borg, but the interesting part about this YouTube video was it talked about why the Borg is such a big deal to humans. So they also go through a lot of the other, competing theories, including my least favorite, which is the V'ger one. Mm-hmm. But Ross, you want to weigh in first?
So as we discussed during the Picard after show, one of the more popular theories during the run of Picard was that the Borg were created by the Romulans. And if you've watched our after show, Carlos and I have sparred at length about that theory, its pros, its cons, what we like about it, what we don't like about it, the case for and against. And my view of the Borg has always been that a mundane origin, like, oh, the Romulans created them, or that they were somehow a product of, like in Star Trek Legacy, that the Borg are a product of Vulcans. Or, of course, there's the V'ger theory. And Star Trek Destiny also did a really interesting one, that it was the Borg began as a desperate survival measure between a race of sentient AI nanomachine life forms and human survivors from the USS Columbia.
Slar.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird.
I'm simplifying that. It actually does a really good job of kind of illustrating that de-evolution, because the species was so much more than what the Borg became. And that's always been my sticking point to a lot of these theories of Borg origin, because the Borg are big. The Borg are elemental in a way. They are a force of nature that's, I feel, a more mundane origin story really does a disservice to. And that is what certified... the YouTube channel was...
Resurrected Starships.
Resurrected Starships, thank you. That's the point that Resurrected Starships brought up. And that's one of the reasons why I shared this video, because I was really compelled by the ideas of his Borg origin theory. And the core of that is technology and its effect on people and its eventual evolution if it follows a specific path. And in this case, it is, as he postulates it, the eventual evolution of social media. Now, it's no secret that all social media on Earth is governed not by people, but by algorithm, by what is most recognizable, what is most shareable, and what is most marketable. And these are very simple, relatively simple equations, especially when compared to something as vast and advanced as an actual artificial intelligence would be. Artificial intelligences, theoretically, would have the same kind of faculties as a human mind would. They would understand emotion. They would understand empathy. They could understand nuanced and complex processes and concepts. But an algorithm, or a dumb AI, only knows its process, its function. Like an algorithm, it propagates a simple idea and encourages what the video calls groupthink. And the eventual evolution of that goes from groupthink to hivethink. And technology evolves so that technology is eventually integrated. And as technology is integrated, that forms something of a hive mind. And those who are part of the collective groupthink begin to fear and resent those who are not, and vice versa, until eventually they come into contact. And as groupthink evolves into a hivethink, creativity and original thought begins to suffer. So they need an infusion of new ideas. So they need to find new people with new ideas to bring in to the group. Assimilation. And from there, it becomes something bigger and ominous and monolithic, until eventually you have something analogous to the Borg collective. And that is what really resonates about this theory with me. Not that the Borg were created by some accident or a collection of circumstance, but more as a warning, a concept of what could be if we continue down a path. A very sci-fi concept that I really, really like. So what do you guys think?
Well, I'll start.
You really want-
Do you want to go first, Travis? Okay,
No,
I'm going to
you
jump
go
in.
ahead.
Okay, so I in general liked the theory he put forth. I don't think it's at odds with other theories, or at least my my theory. But I'm going to disagree on a couple of points. One is I think it makes sense for the Borg actually to have had a mundane origin. I mean, the ancient Borg are not the Borg we know today. They couldn't be. So they were something a lot more primitive, something a lot more fundamental, not very well developed, that could have easily and probably did grow out of some sort of organic civilization, organic-led civilization. And I think that makes more sense. Now, I don't disagree with the idea that smart AIs, growing out of a civilization can, gain sentience and go down the road of groupthink and then assimilation ultimately. But he made one contention that it was a quantum leap that I felt was not well supported. And that was the idea that a smart AI would naturally think like humans, therefore would have emotions or would understand emotions, et cetera. I don't see that at all. I don't think that there's that emotion necessarily comes forth from sentience, at least a complex. I mean, in humans, it's an evolutionary byproduct of the will to survive. It was not an intention. And if you go with the same sort of idea that it's around survival, which I think syncs up pretty well with the rest of his theory, that makes sense. But I just felt like the whole, he starts off with this assumption that I didn't find very well supported.
Well, see, I think the big base argument here is that he makes these contradicting terms, which I think the big thing here is something that I've had to sit on for a while, and even before this video came up. There needs to be a very clear distinction of what algorithm AI is and what we consider what he's considering artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. And the difference here is what he's calling dumb AI is actual artificial intelligence. It is a facsimile of intelligence. And what he's considering, artificial intelligence is not so much artificial intelligence as it is actual intelligence from an artificial being. And that would be kind of, for his argument, Data has actual intelligence. Even though he can't feel emotions, he understands them, he comprehends them, and he can react to them in a way. And yet, what he's talking about in the algorithmic AI is, I'm just looking at data points trying to find the best connecting factors.
You're saying that's what he's doing,
right?
Okay.
The biggest problem in this whole exchange for me is the it's not being able to define those two as well as he should have or could have. And even with us talking right now, there's this cross-pollination between dumb AI and smart AI and this and that and what is sentience to an AI or what is dumb intelligence to an AI. And there, as we talk about this, there's really no clear-cut definition in defining the two terms to separate them, because it's artificial. I mean, it's an artificial life form in the first place. Those things could very well weave into each other.
But I guess my question to the whole theory is why do we assume that the Borg are some kind of AI?
It's not
he's saying they grew out of an AI.
Yeah. The Borg grew out of an algorithm designed around a kind of social media where certain ideas are circulated, certain concepts are circulated in a most efficiently marketable and relatable way.
One of the things around algorithms that is important to remember is that algorithms don't just come out of nowhere. They're written by human beings,
Right.
and a lot of the sort of limited views of human beings are translated into the algorithm. So in some ways, it's as limited in its scope and perspective as the humans who created it. And here's a great example of that. The facial recognition algorithms that Google Photos was using to recognize, who was in your pictures, and then constantly thought Black people were apes, non-human apes, other primates. And that was a problem. And guess what it turned out? All of the programmers behind that facial recognition software were white. They just didn't even think about what it would take to instruct this or construct this AI to actually take into account all kinds of humans, not just the ones that they were most comfortable with. So, I mean, that's one of the things that I think is problematic about algorithms. We see the same problem in algorithms that employers are using these days for hiring people and weeding people out, better put, which actually ends up stifling the kind of diverse and creative, quirky people who sometimes can revolutionize a company, and ends up with exactly what he's predicting here, a kind of groupthink. So that's where, I think the algorithmic part grows out of human beings and exhibits the same kind of biases that human beings have, unless that's dealt with head on. And so far, it really hasn't been.
Well, I mean, that's his argument in the first place, is that the creation of the Borg is just that. Is that a program is only as smart as the person programming it. And if you say, okay, hey, kill this many number of ants, okay, so it kills that many number of ants, cool. Well, what happens? What happens when it starts, when it actually reaches that tipping point of somewhat semi-intelligence, and it goes, well, at this point, you're now the ants.
And I think more what he's trying to say as far as with the creation of the Borg. The algorithm in question was one meant to improve the lives of the people who are using it. One of the common themes that we see in the Borg is that they don't see their mission as one of malice. They see their quest for perfection as one to include as many kinds of people into the collective as possible. When Locutus is on board the Enterprise in Best of Both Worlds Part 2, why do you resist? We only seek to improve the quality of life of all species by incorporating them into the collective.
I think my species the way it is.
I think if we are exploring the origin of the Borg, I think that's the baseline or the origin where we start. It's an algorithm or a limited AI whose purpose was to be beneficial, and then took that programming too far, too literally, or just it evolved on its own without the guiding hand, a more wise guiding hand.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I found interesting, I was reading what was it about? I think it might have been about Voyager, talking about, sort of the expansion of the Borg in that quadrant. And it pointed out that there are probably some species that the Borg have completely ignored because they don't add any real distinctiveness to the collective. And I hadn't really thought of it that way. I just sort of thought of them as sort of these robotic, vacuum cleaners that just hoover up everything that comes in their path. And it turns out, and this makes sense to me, it turns out that they're really more picky about that.
We 7 of 9 says, I can't remember the name of the episode, but the Kazon provide no benefit to the collective,
that was
so they
was
just
the one.
ignore them.
Yeah.
And the Borg, they Yeah, they're picky. They also ignore things that they don't see as a threat or as
Mhm.
irrelevant to the collective at the time.
Until it becomes a threat or irrelevant.
Well,
Right.
To the plot.
yeah, I think the
And
other
that's
thing.
really the reality.
Well, I
You
mean,
just watch First Contact to see the contradictions in that theory over and over again in that film.
well, if you watch the Borg, like in Q-Who, they were like a supernatural force of space termites that just wanted to carve up the Enterprise for resources. They didn't care about the people; they just wanted the raw resources to build upon their ship. We get to Best of Both Worlds, and then they evolve between Q-Who and Best of Both Worlds. So now they're wanting to assimilate, and now they're wanting to take over like the race. I mean, we had a Borg baby in Q-Who. Now in this we don't have, and now we're talking about the Borg grow by assimilation. We move forward again into First Contact. We move into Voyager, and we just see the Borg as we get more and more exposure to the Borg. We see more and more of these contradictions, which in my opinion kind of just wussify the whole concept. Not that just because Voyager's able to beat them, but just overall, like the idea of them being like this force that you really can't do anything about because they don't care about you. They're not interested in your ideology. They're not interested in you at all. All they want is your resources, to turn your resources to make their ship bigger, better, faster. And I think if that was the case, Ross, I think when we start the Borg, where we meet the Borg, I think the mundane explanation of them just kind of falling into this is great. But I think as we look at like what the Borg became, I think this theory makes a little bit more sense.
I would disagree with you a little bit on how much they changed. When we see them in Best of Both Worlds, their only interest in the Enterprise is to take Picard, because their goal is the assimilation of Earth, of humanity, of the culture of the Federation. That's why they're showing up, and they need that go-between in order to communicate what they're trying to do with the rest of them. That was Locutus's function.
But in Q-Who, Guinan's like, they don't care about you. They just want your stuff.
No, they don't.
Want your raw resources.
Well, that's just it. They don't care about the individual. They need Locutus to appeal to the masses.
Right, but they should have just, when they had the Enterprise depowered, they should have just stripped it for its resources, assimilated its crew, and then moved on. Why?
They have bigger fish to fry. They have an entire planet, an entire culture to assimilate. What's one ship?
Because they have more drones. It makes the rest of that mission more
Are you talking
easier.
about in Q-Who or in
Best
of Both Worlds?
Okay.
In Best of Both Worlds. Like if you're going to overrun the Federation, right? And we see that they're attacking planets. So we start off Best of Both Worlds with them, basically scooping off, and destroying an entire colony. Why didn't they just go to Earth? No, I mean they were definitely on like this path of destruction where they were trying to
off their fuel tanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
go ahead.
I'm saying, why just stop with Picard? They should have assimilated. I mean, if it really was just about we're going to assimilate, then they should have just assimilated all of the Enterprise and flew the Enterprise, the assimilated Enterprise to Earth. Because that would have been
But that's the thing. Having assimilated enough people of the Federation, there is this somewhat assimilated learning that to interact with the people of the Federation, you need this ambassador character.
Speaker.
You need a speaker, you need a politician, someone who can speak on behalf of what the collective wants to do. And who better to do that than this dude who is literally the captain of the Enterprise?
Right. My point is the Borg we were introduced in Q2 wouldn't have given an F about that.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem with that, though. The Borg, as introduced in Q-Who, and I agree with you, they were a force of nature. They were. I remember watching that episode.
They were a fucking shark, is all they were. They were a great white shark. That's it, or a tiger. That was the whole point.
And the
of
trouble
that character
with an antagonist like that is they're sort of mindless and not ultimately very interesting. And so they needed to complicate the Borg more, and it became increasingly more and possibly too complicated by the end of Voyager. And, so people who feel like somehow the Borg were less powerful, made less powerful or whatever, by the time they got through Voyager. But I'm not sure that you could have avoided that. I mean, as a one-shot villain, they would have been great in that original incarnation. But if you were going to bring them back, you had to come up with some additional kinds of needs and desires and motivations for them as a species.
It's kind of like the evolution of the Trail and the Trill.
Yeah. And that's it's very common in, outside of the universe.
Or the Ferengi.
Especially the Ferengi.
Yeah, good point.
Where, writers have ideas at the beginning, and when it doesn't work, they're willing to throw them away. And by the time they got to DS9, they were like, why don't we take one of those thrown away Ferengi and turn them into something else?
I think it's more than that. I think at the time they're writing these characters, these baddies, these villains, these aliens of the week, they're literally considering them as an alien of the week. They're not thinking the big picture down the road. We need to establish this major arc and this backstory and all this exposition. They're created for the episode, for the story they're trying to tell at that moment.
That's not necessarily true about the Borg, because there's lots of rumors, there's lots of circulation about the Borg were basically being set up even back to season 1. So in the neutral zone.
They were, but they weren't being set up anything more. I mean, look, they've been clear about this. The intention of how they wrote the Borg initially was it just a monster. That's it. That you can't bargain with. That again, a force of nature, like a shark, white shark, or a tiger. It's just it just does what it does. They may have there's definitely inkling. I don't know back to season 1, at the end of season 2, that they had teased the idea of the Borg.
No, but even back in the neutral zone, the thing that spurned the whole conflict there.
Okay, wait a minute. What episode is in neutral zone?
That was the penultimate episode of season 1.
Okay, that's what I meant then. That is the end of season 1, because Q was season 2.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Which established the first Romulan Borg link in what's now become a much longer chain. But another thing to consider, Jason, is that what we saw of the Borg in that first episode was only ever going to be a slice of what they truly are. They had to be something more than what we saw. Because remember,
just like the decks cut out of the ship.
No, but
that's actually one of my favorite special effects. It still looks good. But my point is that that Q was trying to scare the shit out of Picard, and because he'd gotten too cocky about how evolved humans were, and that they'd basically done a really good job of taking over their part of the galaxy, and he was like, he wanted to teach him a lesson, and so he took him somewhere else where they ain't shit, and that conceivably changed a lot about the Federation, and that hasn't been delved with a lot. I mean, one of the things I liked about Best of Both Worlds was this idea that ever since they ran into the Borg in Q-Who, they had this project going on that to prepare, and we only got to see a little bit of that around Shelby. And I always wish that they had gone more into that. We get another little hint about it around in DS9 around the development of the Defiant, which, by the way, pissed me off in First Contact when the Defiant was shunted aside by this Borg cube like it was nothing. And
it was not shunted aside. It has been fighting like hell the entire time.
Yeah, but it was left
and battle scarred, but still working. Until that very last moment when Worf was ready to ram the thing right into the side of the cube.
Yeah, I just felt they should have done better.
It was one hell of a fight that we did not see.
That's the problem.
I'd like to discuss that for a moment, please, because for anybody who wants a Captain Worf series, just consider that series. Please. Thank you very much. I mean,
So-
so fuck it. We ain't gonna win. Let's just ram the fucking ship out into it.
Perhaps
That's a great
today
idea.
is a good day to die.
And the
Very
pilot on the left
Worf
is like, and the pilot on the left, the tactical officer, he's like, the look on his face is, maybe for you, motherfucker, but not for me.
I mean, let's also be honest. Let's also be honest. Worf entirely forgot that the nose of the Defiant can turn into its own warhead. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it
Yeah,
could
I mean,
have
that was-
launched, the ship has
Whoops.
been through a lot.
I think that's convenient headcanon. My point is that the Defiant should have been a lot more capable in that movie than it was, and essentially it wasn't. It literally was a device to get Worf back on the Enterprise, and so
Yep.
they
Well, that's
as soon as it was able to do that,
I didn't even bother with
That's
it.
it.
But it was awesome to see the ship on the big screen.
it was no
she
doubt
had
about that.
a few moments of glory, and it was
Too few.
glorious.
Too few. I mean, I think
Yes.
basically we agree with each other,
Yeah,
Ross.
yeah,
It's just
yeah.
more about how it was treated in the narrative.
So
of
you got
first
it's
coming
a TNG movie. The Defiant is identified entirely with Deep Space Nine. So yes, it was a vehicle to get Worf there, but the focus always had to be on the Enterprise.
Well, yeah, sure, but yeah, I mean, it
maybe
wouldn't
one
have
day.
been First Contact if it had been any other ship. So, so that just made it problematic, I think, because you can't afford this kind of split focus, yet you've created a split focus, and so they get around that by essentially ignoring it. And that's probably dramatically the better choice, but I just felt like it was a missed opportunity to really delve big picture into how the Federation changed because of this literally existential threat that they had no idea existed until Picard's arrogance spurred Q to take him down a notch.
Never really explained what the Defiant was doing there to begin with either. It should be pointed out because, this all happened within the course of a few hours between the time that they found out that the Borg were coming and the time that the battle of Earth took place there. So what the hell was the Defiant doing there to begin with?
Well,
There were several time gaps at the beginning of that movie. It wasn't just a linear sequence. There were probably several hours and days in between, enough time for the Defiant to get from DS9.
Talk about
DS9
that
is
taking
3
weeks.
weeks away from Earth.
Thank you.
You know what though? You can't.
But
In
wasn't-
Star Trek, those kinds of things have always been.
Wait
mushy.
a minute though.
Wait,
Wasn't the Enterprise at that point on the edge of the neutral zone?
Neutral
Because
zone,
they
yes.
still want him? Okay, how many weeks away is that from Earth?
Exactly.
There's a better
Wasn't there
question.
maybe more going on at that point?
Not yet.
I just don't like how the Enterprise A got to the center of the galaxy in just a few hours, and Deep Space Nine and
I
Voyager
hate
took 70
that.
years to get back from the other side.
Yeah,
of
and
the
that was,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I said, this is one of the bad parts of Star Trek is that they've always been.
Series used to have more
There's a word.
13, more 15, and all. They changed
This
the
is-
scale. at the
Okay,
end.
gotcha. Travis has been waiting. So Travis first, then Son.
I was just gonna say there's an even worse example. The Battle of Wolf 359. Civilians went into the
I
battle
know,
on
that-
the starships.
So
Yeah.
the Reliant, No, that was the name of his ship, wasn't it?
Saratoga.
Saratoga. The Saratoga was a tiny ship. It was basically just a saucer section with, with
saucer for
nacelles
Constitution
added,
class.
welded on top. Why would there be the whole point of families on starships was that the Galaxy class was unique in that, not that this was
Right.
a widespread thing in across Starfleet. That never made sense to me.
But we needed to see Jennifer die.
I know, but that's
He's
just,
going to do the Galaxy class because it would be associated with, I don't know, some stupid reason why they couldn't make it a Galaxy class. They should have, but
They could have made it an Excelsior class, and that probably would have been more
More
believable.
sense.
90s TV. It's weird.
You
Yeah,
can
90s
explain
TV.
any of the incontinuities with a simple
Furman,
thing. Funky shit happens when you warp space time.
There you go.
There you go.
Or because, as I always like, my favorite is always, this happened because plot. That's why.
Because movie.
Yeah, because
All right,
movie.
so the Borg's origins remain as cloudy as ever, but I think we had a really great discussion about this. So, Ross, thanks for pointing our attention to that. And folks at home, we have on our Trello card a link to the YouTube video that started us off in this discussion. So feel free to check it out. Please do. Actually, it's very interesting. Okay, so our next topic is one that I saw it and it didn't register with me. And luckily, Justin also saw it and went, this would be an interesting thing to talk about and show. So we're going to, thank you, Justin, on that. And that is the release of a variety of, I guess you could call them outtakes, but they're calling them intakes from Star Trek The Next Generation. I only got a chance to watch about 3 of them. They are pretty funny. Justin, you want to say more?
I do have the link to the playlist in there. There's 8 of them now. They released the 8th one today. I can't remember which one it is, but I mean, if you know the Next Generation bloopers, you'll be able to spot every single one of them that they edited in there flawlessly. I mean, they've done a really good job with this. It's really quite well done.
Yeah, it is. You know, the one that I'm like, was that a blooper? Was the one where Picard is complaining before he's being he and who was it? Him and Data and Geordi? Was it, or being transported, and Chief O'Brien is there and Riker's behind Chief O'Brien, and he makes some reference to what was it? It was something he was like, oh, ship in a bottle. He's like, no one knows ship in a bottle. No. He looks at Data, he looks at Geordi, he looks at Riker, nobody seems to know what he's talking about. And then finally, Chief O'Brien's like, I know shit.
One of the ones that
and you know, and Patrick Stewart it's as if he was Picard, you know, a little frustrated by his own crew. They go off, they transport away, and I kept expecting Riker to like lean over to Chief O'Brien and just say, kiss ass. That would have been funny.
This is one of my favorite ones. We can actually share these. Since they're on YouTube, they're not going to strike us for it anyway, so...
Both of the other ships have been destroyed.
2 down, 1 to go.
Data report. The anomaly has nearly collapsed.
We're losing containment. Goodbye, Jean-Luc. I'm going to miss you. You had such potential. But then again, all good things must come to an end. Containment field isn't critical. I'm losing
God bless you, Brent.
It hasn't edited it so flawlessly. It's just like it's always been there. It's great. I mean, they're all like that. You'll have to click through the playlist, but it's absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, they're short, so you know you can take one at a time. But yeah, totally worth it. And
the guy's doing more. He's going to keep doing them, so we'll be getting new ones almost every so often. You guys really got a timetable out, so.
All right.
Well, keep an eye on.
If there's any particularly good ones, please let us know, and we'll take a look at them too. Okay, so Picard news. LeVar Burton let slip that he is in talks with producers about having Geordi LaForge appear in season 2 of Star Trek Picard. And how are we feeling about? Is this going to be TNG2 after all, given what we saw in season 1, or how do we think that's gonna work?
Season
Jason,
2. Geordi is dating Guinan.
No. Geordi's got to be with Leia Brahms.
Oh, she's so yesterday's news.
Well, I mean,
still married.
But I mean,
polyamory exists in the future.
What I would say is looking at how they leverage legacy characters in Picard. Obviously there was nostalgia involved, but they definitely used Riker and Troy in a way to propel the story forward. Like, it wasn't fan service. It wasn't just wank, it was legitimate, it was served the legitimate purpose of the story. So as long as they bring in, and it's not like fan wanky, and it's like, but it's really does propel the narrative forward. And we get, the nostalgia along with it. I think that's great.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, they didn't, the most fan wanky thing that they did last season was in the final episode when Riker shows up with the fleet. Okay, that's the most fan wank of fan wankiness that you can get. But overall,
but at least they teased it. They did tease it.
Yeah, I mean, the previous TNG characters were
thanks, Jason.
Nice.
Sorry, go ahead.
They were used judiciously. I mean, they were used appropriately, I felt, and it was purposeful, and it added to the overall story arc. It didn't take away from it. It was not TNG 2, and I would imagine, I don't really know how you have this series, considering the subject matter and the arc of the first season, without Geordi, considering we know he was at Utopia Planitia. I mean, that's got to come up. I mean, you can't ignore that. So
True, but isn't that storyline a little exhausted at this point? We know who's behind it. We know.
I expect it's going to bleed into the next season, to an extent, But I mean, he also too, he needs a doctor, and Geordi was always Data's doctor, so I mean, it makes sense. Now that he
doesn't need a doctor anymore, though.
No, he needs an engineer.
Golem ever.
That's my point. He needs an engineer. That's my point. He, like Data, knew more about, or like Geordi knew more about Data than anyone else did. But I would imagine he's not going to be a regular cast member. I would think he would be there, as the plot needs him, whatever story they're going to tell next season. So yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with them doing that. If you had asked me at the beginning of this season, before having seen any of them, I would have said, no, that's enough. From what I already know we got enough characters with TNG. But, the way they've been able to incorporate them has been satisfactory. So
I think what we're going to see, going to see out of a season 2 would be something along the lines of, and I'm not directly comparing this because there's this movie, and I can't remember the name of it for the life of me, but some white trash dude has a medical issue. He winds up getting a new lease on life, and then he spends the rest of the movie making up for all the ill will he caused to people in his old life, essentially. After this thing, I have no clue.
Are you talking about? Is it an old movie?
No.
Okay, because
you
just described Rock Hudson in a magnificent obsession. Is what you just did. So you're not talking about. Are you talking about the Dallas Buyers Club?
I honestly don't know. It's just
all right.
Yeah, exactly.
But essentially,
great movie, by the way.
What the bleed through we're going to see is Picard making amends for the mistakes of the past. So it would make sense that he would get in touch with Geordi, see if there's been any development with them being able to, quote unquote, put out the fires on Mars or rebuild Utopia Planitia or whatever there. I mean, going back to the warrior Romulans planet to help settle all of that crap, because let's be honest, that planet is a mix of both Romulans and Terrans. So there's a lot of shit that still needs to be settled there. Yeah, I think we're going to see a bleed through of a lot of him trying to make up for those mistakes.
And it would be really interesting to see if maybe Geordi doesn't trust Picard, as he's now a synth, and to see how the biases of humanity.
But Geordi was Data's best friend, so he's not predisposed to be suspicious about that.
Unless maybe Leia was on Mars when it got destroyed.
Ooh, that would be good.
And we don't know how Andrew LaForge got either, because he would have been on Mars as well when this attack.
Not
was
necessarily.
down.
He could have been in many places.
According to the Last Best Hope, I think that was the name of the tie-in novel, Geordi was on Earth when the attack on Mars happened. The only people who were on Mars were the essential workers.
Ouch!
Good, everybody.
Have my moment.
Yeah, but I like Jason. I like your theory that doesn't explain Leah Brahms, which that would be a motivation that could have consequences.
I don't think Geordi would be predisposed to mistrust as far as synths go, especially when he discovers the origin of the synths of that colony, knowing that they were made from data. I think that might make him more curious about them. But
again, I think if we want to explore contemporary themes, and we want to explore, kind of the way maybe certain aspects of America may feel about people coming in through, because that's what this whole story was tying into was the idea of suspicion and banning people and building walls. I think there's no better way to do that to take someone who's been personally touched by tragedy, right, and explore those feelings in a very raw fashion, and then see that person then get redeemed through the arc of the story.
Well,
so again,
that's literally the whole. That's literally what happens with the Romulan senator guy. You could still explore that and not have to have Geordi at all, as long as you go back to the Romulan planet.
Except he got decapitated.
Well, sure, he got decapitated, but there's
I
more
thought
than
we were talking about
there's more than one Romulan on that planet, though.
But listen though, by using Geordi, you're taking someone that we love, and you're exploring these raw kind of.
So you're basically saying dark Geordi.
Not necessarily dark Geordi, but just jaded Geordi.
Come on, that's dark, dude.
I think we're basically saying that we're expecting Geordi to be a big racist. I think that's what we're getting at here.
Well, there's another possibility too. He could just be pissed off at Picard for abandoning them, and just secluding himself, and just throwing away their friendship and everything.
Maybe they just had fucking lunch, okay? Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the whole thing. Nothing more complicated. They just sit down.
That's not when you only have 10 episodes in a season. You don't waste time on something.
Either that or
everything has meaning.
Again, I am still pulling for that. Geordi cannot find the right love partner. Therefore, he is right now married to Guinan.
Nope, Guinan said that she had her limit of marriage partners and nemesis.
She's done with husbands.
She's done.
What was it, 23?
The possibility is that there could be something wrong with Picard's body.
God, can you imagine having Geordi as a husband? Jeez.
Well, overall, though, I wonder how much we're going to see bleed over from season 1. I don't know. I mean, what questions really are left hanging? And I know Michael Chabon has said that Picard now being a synthetic will have implications, but is that what's going to be the center storyline moving forward? I don't
won't
think
be one
so.
of the center ones. It'll be part of the story arc, but I think we're going to see a problem with his body in this season. It's going to require the Forge.
I don't.
For another time.
Yes, we can speculate about that.
Let's table this.
What questions were left open from season 1? The entirety of a Borg cube with Borg people.
Well, yes, but that argues for what I've always said, which is there's stuff about the Borg we need to find out.
And Narek, don't forget Narek.
Yes.
And I think from when I'll have to find it, but I'm pretty sure they mentioned that the Borg cube will factor into something next season.
Well, I gotta say, I
makes
think
sense.
the exploration of Narek is far more important than Picard having lunch with Geordi. So that's where I'm at.
I agree with
And not
you.
to
And you
mention
want to
his
see if he
sister will be
actually
back.
did it with his sister.
Oh, hey, that's an idea.
I don't want to see. I know he did.
Geordi's one of the few people who have extensive experience with Borg tech. So he
Yeah.
might be going to the synth planet to help out.
And so is Crusher.
That too.
He's also one of the very few people to have at least mostly fully recovered from Romulan brainwashing.
Oh, there you go.
And also, the Doctor would also be there because he's already rumored to be in season 2. He's also
Wait,
a
who?
Borg expert.
Who?
The
Are you
Doctor-
talking about Robert Picardo, Doctor?
Cardo.
Yeah, the Doctor.
I could see
Borg
something like
expert.
that, but I don't see, because even if you look at Riker and Troy as a template for how, former co-stars were integrated into the story, they were integral ultimately in the way that Jason described. They were a pivot point. They provided a pivot point for Picard. Oh, that's a lot of P's. As his story moved forward, but it wasn't about them. They shared what happened, their own tragedy that happened, and that moved alongside the tragedy that Soji was suffering from and that Picard was trying to resolve, but they didn't really work together. He stopped and they helped, and then he moved on. So I don't think you're going to see any kind of ongoing Geordi thing or Crusher thing. And I'm
Then he
still
rode
very
in with the
skeptical.
cavalry and rode right outs.
He was in and out. Exactly.
I think a more compelling storyline for Geordi would be something sort of similar to the Rafi thing, where the attack happened, but Geordi knew stuff like that wasn't supposed to happen. So he started asking one too many questions. And here's this guy who has a whole lot of visibility because of who he served under. And you can't really just drum him out because he was head of the Utopia Planitia shipyards. So maybe
this series isn't about him. I don't think you're going to see. I don't think you're going to see much more about this conspiracy. It's already been revealed.
What I'm saying is, instead of them having washed him out like they did Rafi, he's been moved to working on a hollow project, dealing with the Doctor.
He's working with Barclay.
That's ultimate punishment.
Forever.
Ultimate punishment.
Hey, Barclay's gotten a lot better.
Oh,
Besides,
Barclay.
Barclay's better at he bugs Deanna, not Geordi.
That's right.
Remember,
I liked
Barclay
how they
has
used him in Voyager.
Yeah, my theory, I told you this, Barclay's my favorite character in the entire franchise, to be honest. He's such an everyman. He's got the anxieties of all of us. That's why I appreciate the guy.